Hello, everyone. We are live. I am Stacy Nell, and I'm the executive director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. And I'm braving the tornado sirens today. And today it's just me. The first one was just me, and this one today is just me because I have a PowerPoint presentation I've been putting together, and it's sort of gone on the road. And people have like, you should share that. And I'm like, you know what? I have a forum to share that, so I think I'm going to share the PowerPoint presentation, and it's everything that is on the upcoming ballot for November 8th. It's long, and it may take us in half an hour to get through it. So that's what we're going to do today. My first question is always, what do people have for lunch? I've already had lunch. It's nothing fancy. I had one of those like frozen lunch meals because it was high in protein. I'm trying to up my protein intake because you got to be healthy. Okay, let us get to the slides here. So this is a PowerPoint presentation that I put together to take on the road with Carolina Lozano, who's the interim director for KAAAC. And we went down to Emporia State University to talk about voter education and voter information. So here's what we put together. The general election, in case you don't know, is November 8th. It normally is the first Tuesday of November in an election year, but since the first Tuesday is November 1st, it's actually the second Tuesday. Little trivia in case you're wondering. So the history of voting. Here's the interesting thing about the history of voting. According to our founding fathers, only white land-owning men were the ones who were allowed to vote. But things started to change in 1870 with the 15th Amendment. That's when Black men officially got the vote. In 1920, the 19th Amendment gave white women the vote. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, and it addressed some of the barriers that were still in place, especially in the South, that were barring people from voting. It's interesting that the Voting Rights Act is sort of continues to make the news up until this day. But I'll stop for a second and say in 1971, it was the 26th Amendment that got the voting age set at 18. And so the Constitution, the Constitution continues to be a living document that people can change. And, the originalists, there were at least 26 amendments to the Constitution to update it. The United States Supreme Court is currently looking at an Alabama gerrymandering case that may further gut the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So voting rights are still very much in the news. They're still very important, still things that we need to pay attention to. But here's the lion's share of why we're here. What is on the ballot coming up? There are several races. There are several national level races. So the first of which is the United States Senate. So little civics lesson. There are 2 senators per state, and they serve 6-year terms in Washington, D.C. So this is not the Kansas Senate. This is the United States Senate. A third of the senators are up every 4 years. And so this year, the incumbent is a Republican named Jerry Moran. He is running against 2 people, Mark Holland, who's a Democrat, and David Graham, who's a Libertarian. So that will be on the ballot. And I more or less am trying to go through the ballot from the top all the way down to the bottom. So the first thing you'll see is the United States Senate. The United States House of Representatives. Now these, again, this is a 2-year term in Washington, D.C. All 4 of the House races are up every 2 years. So all 4 of the House races will be up on the ballot this year. Kansas has 4 representatives that serve in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. In District 1, Tracy Mann is the incumbent running against the Republican incumbent running against James Beard, who's a Democrat. District 2, Jake Turner is a Republican incumbent running against Patrick Schmidt, a Democrat, and Michael Sutter is a write-in. District 3, Sharice Davids is a Democratic incumbent running against Amanda Atkins, who's a Republican, and Steve Hull, who's a Libertarian. And in 4, Ron Estes is the Republican incumbent running against Bob Hernandez, a Democrat, and Kyle Jacobs, an independent. So these are one of these races where it will depend very much on where you live, who you get to vote for. District 1 is the large one, the big first out towards west, whereas District 3 is the smallest one in Wyandotte and Johnson counties. So it depends. District 2 is kind of like the middle, where like KU, K-State, it's kind of like this up and down, although everything is starting to move around with the new districts. And 4 is down by Wichita. So those are the national level races. Then there's some state level races. Kansas governor is up for election. this in November. It's a 4-year term, and they are elected at the midterm, so 2 years offset from the presidential election. Laura Kelly is the Democratic incumbent. She is running against Derek Schmidt, the Republican challenger, Seth Cordell, a Libertarian challenger, and Dennis Pyle, who got on the ballot as independent. Independent, unaffiliated, independent. So there's a lot on the ballot. Kansas Secretary of State. Now, the Kansas Secretary of State, the Secretary of State is the chief elections officer of the state, and they're the ones who are in charge of administrating elections, voter registration throughout the state, and they also handle campaign finance reports and register lobbyists. The Secretary of State, the Kansas Secretary of State, is sort of the overarching chief election officer. But state elections, as I understand it, are held really, really solely. The hard work is done at the county level. And we'll talk about county level election offices a little later on. They're not up for ballot, but just, to contact your county level office in order to get good information about what's going on exactly where you are. Scott Schwab is the Republican incumbent, and he's running against Gina Repass, a Democratic challenger, and Colleen Lang, a Libertarian. Kansas Attorney General. So this is the chief legal service to the state government, also a 4-year term. Right now, there is no incumbent that's running because Derek Schmidt is the current Kansas Attorney General, and he is running for governor. So there's 2 people who are vying for Attorney General right now. Chris Mann is the Democrat, and Chris Kobach is the Republican. Kansas State Treasurer. So the state treasurer is kind of the state banker. He oversees things like he's on the board of Capers. He or she, it could be a woman, and also is in sort of doing a lot of work right now currently with unclaimed property. It's a 4-year term that's elected in the same cycle as the governor. Right now, Lynn Rogers is the Democratic incumbent running against Steve Johnson, Republican, and Steve Roberts, a Libertarian. There's a lot on the ballot. Kansas Insurance Commissioner. Full disclosure, did not know that this necessarily was going to be on this ballot. This one took me off guard. I knew this was a thing, didn't know it was going to be on the ballot until I started researching the ballot. So it's the head of the Kansas Department of Insurance, okay? They regulate and review companies for financial solvency and regulatory compliance, educates consumers and helps licensed agents selling insurance and products in the state. Totally had to Google that. Didn't know that just off the top of my head. 4-year term. And it's Vicki Schmidt is the Republican running against Keel Cochran, the Democrat. It's funny. There's 3 Schmidts on the ballot. I don't think they're related. There's Vicki Schmidt, Patrick Schmidt, and Derek Schmidt. I don't think they're related. Are they related? Wouldn't that be interesting? Anyway, I digress. Now, we talked about the United States House of Representatives. There's also the entire Kansas House of Representatives. So these are the people who serve 2-year terms in Topeka. The entire House is up for a ballot, is up for election. In order to know what district you live in, you will have to look up your own ballot. And so this is where contacting your county election office comes in handy. Or let me drop this link in the chat now. You can go to KS Votes, ksvotes.org. You can look yourself up. It'll give you your districts. It'll give you a sample ballot. So ksvotes.org is a wonderful resource for all things election as well as your county election office. The district size, I should say, the district size is determined by population. So rural districts will have a much larger sort of, geographical footprint, as opposed to there are some districts that are inside urban areas that are quite small geographically, but all of the districts roughly have the same population size. Yes, ksvotes.org. ksvotes.org is a wonderful resource for all things ballot. Now, there is one Senate seat that's up for a special election. It's Senate District 38. And for reference, this is the area in Southwest Kansas that's like Liberal and Dodge. So it's kind of in that Southwest corner. Normally, the Senate seats are up every 4 years, the same years as presidential elections. But this election was triggered because Bud Estes died in office, and he was replaced by Ron Reichman Sr., but that appointment took place, if I understand correctly, before May of that year. And so in order to actually officially get the seat, they had to have an election. So Ron Reichman Sr. not to be confused with Junior, who's in the Kansas House. A Republican incumbent is running against Jose Lara, who's the Democratic challenger in that chair, for that seat. Kansas State Board of Education. So the Kansas State Board of Education, their mission is to prepare the Kansas students for lifelong success through rigorous quality academic instruction, career training, and character development, according to each student's gifts and talents. This is not to be confused with your local boards of education. Again, so there's all these levels. So this is for the Kansas State Board of Education, not the local Board of Education. There are 10 seats that make up each members' districts. It's 4 Senate seats apiece. And they're the ones who set the academic standards for the state. They do not set local curriculum. It's hard to say. All the odd number seats are up. So seats 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are up. Again, this is one of these times where you're going to have to look up your ballot to know whether or not your seat is up. For example, I had Googled my home. I live in Johnson County, so I'm in District 3. But when I Googled here, the office address for where I work, as near as I can tell, like the Topeka area, I don't think that seat is up. So please, you'll have to, again, go to either check your ballot at ksvotes.org or contact your county election office and you can get a sample ballot. Then you can know exactly whether or not your district, because honestly, I don't know the lie of the land well enough to know where all these districts are, but I know that the odd numbered ones are up for election this year. Okay, now we're getting into it. Retention of the Kansas Supreme Court judges and retention of judges, period. For something like this is one of those things where I'm going to tell you, you are going to have to read your particular ballot. Again, I've pulled the ballot where I live in Johnson County. I've pulled the ballot here where the office is in Topeka. And the ballots are going to be different because they are district judges. There's district judges. There's appellate judges. There are a lot of judges that are on the ballot. Okay. Read your ballot closely. As near as I can tell, the only set of judges that will be on everyone's ballots will be the 6 of the 7 Kansas Supreme Court judges are up for retention. Okay. So again, you can look at ksvotes.org. If you go to the Secretary of State's page, there's plenty of places where you can get the ballots to find all the different judges that are on the ballot. Okay. Proposed changes to the Kansas Constitution. Yes, there are 2 more. There are 2 more proposed changes to the Kansas Constitution. And August 2nd got a lot of air. The vote about the proposed change to the Kansas Constitution on August 2nd took a lot of energy, a lot of focus, and a lot of resources. But there are 2 more changes that are being proposed for the Kansas Constitution. And I've had some people ask me, how do these changes even get on the ballot? And I'll take some time to talk about that, because Kansas is a state, unlike Missouri. Missouri, people can petition and have have ballot initiatives. Kansas is not a place where that happens. So for there to be a proposed change for the Constitution like this to show up on the ballot, it has to come by having a 2/3 vote of the Kansas legislature. So the thing to understand is that these proposed changes to the Kansas Constitution are on the ballot at all, not because people have asked for them, but because the legislature in its current makeup has asked and has passed to have these proposed changes put on the ballot. It was that legislature that put the Value Them Both amendment on the ballot on August 2nd. We saw that amendment get defeated. It's that same group of people who are proposing these next 2 changes to the ballot. The first one has to do with legislative veto. So these are 2 explainers of what a yes vote means and what a no vote means. Much like August 2nd, a yes vote is to make a change and a no vote is just to leave it alone. So what happens with this is that the yes vote supports a constitutional amendment that would allow the state legislature to pass laws by a simple majority to vote or revoke, suspend rules and regulations adopted by executive agencies or officers. So now, legislative veto, the legislature can veto the executive branch. It takes 2/3. And so part of this is that instead of saying that it would take 2/3, they're like, we want it just to be a simple majority, 50%. The idea being that it's a whole lot easier to override a veto if you only have to get 50% of the vote as opposed to 2/3 of the vote. And then also, this gets into the weeds. It's not just the legislature overriding the governor. It's the legislature can override the rules and regulations adopted by the executive branch. So it's not just can it's not one. It would make it easier for the legislature to override the governor, but it's also getting into anything that the executive branch rules and regulations pass. Again, there is a mechanism through which the legislature can address rules and regulations of the executive agencies. But the way they would need to do it is that they would need to introduce a bill. It would need to pass both houses. It would need to be signed by the governor. So this is just a way of cutting through the entire established way of doing things and just saying, nope, we just want to take a simple majority and be able to go through and change things. Okay, do you want them to have that power? Okay, a no vote is to change, leaves everything the way it is now. Yes changes things, no leaves it the same. The second proposed constitutional change is the election of sheriffs. Now, this is the one, and I had a professor from Wichita State on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it there, and I've talked to different people about it. And this one is very interesting because I'm not sure why this needs to be changed. Again, this is the idea that a yes is changing things, and a no leaves it the same. And this is one of those things that, you could see it benefiting either sides of the political aisle. It can benefit conservatives in some instances. It could benefit liberals in some instances. So it's interesting. I think the thing that goes through my brain is, again, given the fact that this is being proposed by the Kansas legislature in its current makeup, I don't know why they feel the need to change the Constitution to do this. So, but I'll just leave that out there for you. Again, you can, and this will, as far as I can tell, because again, I printed my ballot from Johnson County. This explanation of yes and no for both the constitutional amendments will be on the ballot as well. Look up your ballot. I can't stress this enough. Go to your county election office or to KS Votes, or we'll have other resources. Look up your ballot because there may be other races for where you are. For example, where I live in Johnson County, the chair of the Johnson County Commissioners is on the ballot. I know there are school board elections in Wichita County. I know, for example, we talked about the special race out in the Senate districts in Liberal out towards Southwest Kansas. So depending on where you live, there may be other races for your location on the ballot. So I cannot stress to you enough the importance of looking up your ballot early. And you can print off and it'll clearly say sample. It's not the official ballot, so don't get worried about that. It'll clearly say sample. That way you can take some time to read through the ballot, research people if you'd like to, figure out who you'd like to vote for. You can mark up your little sample ballot, the one that says sample, right? I'm talking about the sample ballot. And you can take that with you to vote. You can take that with you so you make sure that you click the right thing on the voting machine. Okay, that's the sample ballot. You can also request an early ballot. You can do that, and that would be the official ballot. At ksvotes.org, you can request an early ballot. You will need to do that ahead of time. I believe you can do that now. I believe you can do that now. And then in which case they will mail you, and they will mail it to you. They will mail you an official ballot, okay? If you go to your county election office and print off a sample ballot, and it'll clearly say sample, that's not the official ballot. But you may have them mail you an official ballot. And that one, don't just mark all over, fill it out very carefully. Make sure that it's back in the envelope that they give you. Make sure that you follow all the instructions on the outside of the envelope. Do you need to sign the outside of the envelope? Please sign the outside of the envelope. Do you need to put a stamp on that? Please put a stamp on that. Are there external ballot boxes that you can walk it to or drive past and put it in? Please pay attention to all the rules and regulations and everything that your local county office has got set up in order to make sure that if you have a mail-in ballot, that it gets cast. Okay, here we go. The election timeline as it stands. The deadline to register to vote is tomorrow. That's also part of the reason why I wanted to do this today. If you or someone you know is going to be 18 by election day, you can register to vote So all those ones that are in high school, please get them registered to vote. They can vote, but you have to be 18 by the election day. But the deadline to register is tomorrow. Please make sure that you register to vote. You can register to vote at ksvotes.org. Advanced voting by mail will begin across the state soon. That's what I said. If you need to get a mail-in ballot, please request one so they can get it to you, so you have time to fill it out and get it back to them. Early voting is available all around the state. Okay. I know that I believe early voting is starting. I think I heard that they said that the governor was going to go vote on is it this Thursday? I don't know. I can't remember. But it is very easy to vote in early in person. And I would really suggest, if it's available to you to go vote early in person, please do so. It will help you avoid lines on election day. It'll help ease the burden on the poll workers for election day. What we found is that on August 2nd, there was an incredibly high turnout. And there are reports across the state of people having to wait in line on election day for up to an hour. And I know for some people, they may not have the time in their schedule to stand in line for an hour. It may not be physically possible for them to stand in line for an hour. It may place unburdens on childcare or transportation systems, or whatever it takes to get people to vote. So I encourage people, if at all possible, to vote ahead of time and try to not vote early on election day. Okay. I know some people are like, well, I always go on election day and that's just what I've always done. That's great. That's fine. But if you can go earlier and get your ballot in, either take the ballot in if you have a mail-in ballot or vote early, it just does make the whole process go a lot smoother. Okay, election day. Let's say election day comes and you're just like, no, I'm going to vote in person on election day. You can't tell me anything otherwise. That's great. If you are in line at 7 p.m., stay in line. Okay, that is so crucial. Again, just the thought that anyone was dissuaded or discouraged by a long line on election day and got out of line literally turns my stomach. But if you are in line at 7 p.m., please stay in line and make sure that you cast your ballot, your vote. All right, final resources. Ballotpedia, which I have to practice saying every time. I always want to say Ballotopia, but Ballotpedia is a wonderful resource where it'll go into the weeds on all of everything that's going to be on the ballot. 411.org. I want to take some special time to talk about 411.org. I'm going to drop that in the chat because this is a wonderful resource where it'll go through the entire ballot and you can actually click as a practice, like as a sample ballot. You can click, I want to vote for this person. I want to vote for that person. And it'll go through all the races. At the end, when you say finish, it asks you for either an email or a text or a phone number, and they will email or text you everyone that you chose. So again, you could take some time to figure out who you want to vote for, how you want to vote, what do you want to do. They will send you electronically everyone that you said you were going to vote for. That way you can have it on your phone or print it out so that when you go into the ballot, into actually vote, you can remember who you were going to vote for, because the ballot is long. As you can tell, there's like 13 races. There's some special local elections. There's judges. There's constitutional changes. So the ballot is very long. Again, KSSOS.org is the Kansas Secretary of State website. That's also another resource. You can look up districts, look up your registration. But your county election, I'm probably going to point you more closely to your county election office, because they will have specific details for your specific location, which is going to be the most helpful for you, depending on where you are in the state. Because the ballot will look different in Johnson County versus Sedgwick County versus, Seward County. And then this last resource, I'm going to move my picture here. 866 Our Vote. Let me put that in the chat as well. 866 Our Vote. This one is an important resource. It's being staffed by lawyers from the ACLU. So it's to report any intimidation or irregularities. So if you go to vote and if there's any intimidation tactics or irregularities, if there's anything going on at your polling location that you think might cause people to feel uncomfortable, or as if just really if there's anything, if people are having difficulty casting their ballots, if people are being turned away for any reason, if there are people who are standing around trying to potentially intimidate potential voters. I know, for speaking as I'm the executive director of the African American Affairs Commission, so I know that historically in this country there have been a lot of voter intimidation tactics that have been aimed at my community. So if you see anything at all that you think is irregular, or just go to 866.org. Oops, I have the phone number as well. Let me get that. Oops, that's not what I wanted to see. This is what happens when this is what happens when I have to do my own technology. Here we go. 866-687-8683. So that is the phone number for any vote irregularities at all. You can call that number and you will be in touch. And again, there are Kansas specific ACLU lawyers who will be there to answer phones, to answer any questions, and to help out in any way that they can. Okay, here's really the bottom line. Elections are determined by the people who show up. That's it. Our community has got to show up. A lot of times I have heard the criticism of elected officials coming from the community saying, well, they don't pay attention to us. They don't care what happens to us. Sometimes the simple truth is that if we don't show up and show that we're watching what they're doing, it's quite possible that's why they're not paying attention to us. If we showed up and voted strongly in strong numbers at every election, they would pay attention to us. This is not a presidential election year. So usually in midterms, the turnout dips a little bit. So here's my challenge to you, is to make sure that you are registered, make sure that everyone in your family's registered, make sure that you look up your ballot to know what's on it, and make sure that you help your friends turn out to vote. All right, here's the last pitch. Friends don't let friends skip elections. I had Lindsay Ford from Voter to Voter Network on a few weeks ago. We talked about setting up like your team. That way you can have some accountability to know which of your friends are voting and help hold them accountable. It's just really crucial that we have a high voter turnout and that people let their voices be heard. The ballot is long. We're under a half an hour. I was talking fast, but that's fine. The links are in the chat. You can go back through, check out your local county election office. They will be able to be a great resource for you. I've had plenty of contact with the Johnson County Election Office. Those people are wonderful. Their only desire is to see a good election happen. So contact them and your local county election offices, and they would be a great resource to you. Okay, there we go. Whew, I got through it in under half an hour. I was talking fast. If you have any questions, yes, links are in the chat. This has been fantastic. I will be back next week with another guest. And happy voting, everybody. Bye.